I'm the Tribune. My name is Joshua, and I have to say something right out of the gate. I don't call just anything my enemy. At all. It's very important to understand this. What you call your enemy speaks to your value. It speaks to your mission. Now, the first thing I want to say is that God doesn't have enemies because nobody's worthy to be his enemy. Satan is way below him. He's not God's enemy. Satan is our enemy. Situations are not God's enemy. They could be our enemy. The things he's working out inside of our own character, those aren't his enemies. Those are our enemies. So I'm really careful to talk to the Lord and say, what do you call my enemy? Whatever you call, I'll call. I actually refuse to call certain people my enemies. They're not worthy of it. I don't call certain situations my enemies. That's why haters are not necessarily bad and they're your enemies. I really think God is very angry when we are so focused on haters. And we foster this mentality in the church of we say the word haters and everybody starts passing out and running down and getting really excited that God's going to deal with their haters. That's not God's agenda. And in fact, dealing with your haters is success in his purpose and winning them over to the kingdom. So if we're shouting about that, then we should be shouting. But if you're shouting in that way, then that means you're not saying that these people are your enemies. They're tools. They're tools to sharpen you. In fact, many of the times, they're also distractions. Total distractions. Because while we're so concerned about tiny enemies that aren't even enemies, that aren't worthy of our time and energy and even focus, then we don't build and we can't hear God. And our relationship with him doesn't grow because we are so focused on petty matters. He's very concerned about this. It angers him. Because he's thinking way higher. He's thinking about getting a mission done. That's what he's thinking about. Now, this video is specifically about making sure we consider carefully who and what we call our enemies. Because the next video I make is going to go into God's agenda for these things. So if I give you God's agenda for these things and you think you're going to take God's principles and thoughts on enemies and you actually call a 2-year-old your enemy, then you've missed the point and you will be fighting this giant war strategy of spiritual warfare against Satan when this is a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old. For example, I'm walking down the street and a 2-year-old looks up at me with a balloon in his hand and he says, "You look like Barney." Now, if I don't keep in mind that this is a 2-year-old, I can get really offended. Hater. Hater. He's calling me fat. He's calling me, I'm overweight. I'm unhealthy. He's this. I'm that. He doesn't like how I look. I have a big nose. My head. He just called my head huge. And he's a hater. And I go to God and like, how dare he? And God's like, he's 2. Okay. And did you ever realize that you're wearing a purple shirt, Joshua? You're wearing a purple shirt. He's like, you get it. Come back into the room and let's talk about these blueprints now. And actually, you should go and squeeze that little kid, give him a hug and say, I'm glad that you enjoyed Barney this morning. And then you'll realize that he's now talking about Baby Bop. And he's just going on because he's not even trying to attack you. He's just an infant. This situation happens all the time. But it happens with things that you don't discern. We don't see these things. And we're wasting our energy on situations like that. She doesn't like me. So what? They're trying to hold me back. Okay. Who are you working for? Who are you working for? They're holding you back? How? Who? Nobody can do that if you're working for God. So we have fostered a culture, especially in the church, and it's actually in Satan's kingdom too, where everybody's just they're singing songs about haters, and everybody's saying all these things, and I'm going to show my haters. It's stupid. It's so low level thinking. It's actually scary. So in this video, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about making sure that we recognize who our real enemies are, make sure they're worthy of our purpose. And then we got to deal with them how God says. And we'll talk about what God says about that after this video. But in order to do this, you need to become a Christian, have a relationship with God, and become friends with Him. Then you know what's worthy of you. Other than that, it's impossible to know. You know why it's impossible to know what's worthy to call your enemy? Because if you don't know God and you can't hear His voice, then you really actually don't know how valuable you are. You don't know what your mission is. You don't know what He's asking of you. So how can you know? You will look at a squirrel and call it your enemy because it was too loud on the tree. So this video is to make you think. Do you want to know your value? Do you want to know who really your enemies are? Because the enemies that you can't see, they're actually puppeting you. That's what's happening. They're actually puppeting you, and you don't realize it. You're fighting a squirrel, while your real enemy is actually concocting a mission to really destroy your purpose and your life and major consequences. That's what this video is about. No, I'm not concerned about haters. And it's very rare that I'll actually call somebody my enemy. It's very rare. Most people who think they're my enemies and that I don't like them, I really don't feel anything about them at all. I don't really feel anything. Because they're not worth it. I'm focused on building. I'm focused on hearing God and the strategy. I'm focused on what God tells me to think about. And that's enough for me because, like I said in my past videos, when God speaks something to you, He can speak one thing to you that is so powerful that you really don't have time to think about too much else. I mean, it's actually a waste of energy to even think about enemies. In fact, I've had massive attacks. You guys couldn't imagine while God was talking to me about something amazing, and I just was able to not think too much about it. All I think about is if I'm getting attacked in some kind of way, I only ask God, are we gonna? What do you say about this? Then I listen to what He says, and that determines what I do. But we're going to go into the next video, and trust me, you'll want to hear this because it'll save your life. It'll save your family. It'll save your purpose. It'll make you effective. And I'm talking to people today who want to be effective. I'm not talking about people who just want to just not do anything and not move towards brilliant things with God. I'm not even concerned about that. In fact, if that's you, then hopefully this stirs you to want to consider going in that direction. But if not, then you should leave. You really should, because this stuff is no use to you. God really wants us to know our value. And the beauty about enemies, true enemies, is it teaches you who you are. It teaches you what you have inside. It teaches you what he's talking to you about is so powerful. It teaches you all these things. And that is why it's important to notice your enemies, your real ones. Hear God and let him explain to you what is your enemy. You will not regret it. I promise. And I'm going to take you through these things so that you know. And some people might be thinking, why would he come on the camera and tell people his secrets about what he thinks about certain enemies? Well, it doesn't matter because they can't stop anything anyway. I'm trying to build people and help people. But even if my enemies, which I really don't consider people my enemies too much. I mean, I can't even think of one. Even Satan, if he's watching this, listening, okay, the strategy will work anyways. Even if I tell you what I'm thinking, the strategy will work. You can't do anything about it. That's how I feel about it. And that's how powerful my principles are that I'm giving you that God taught me. Come back for the next video. We're going to talk next about what God says about these things. So that when he says these things, you can be obedient as soon as possible and not lose much. But instead, gain everything. Hail Jehovah.